Chapter 9, Sections 6 to 8 of A Modern Utopia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Modern Utopia by H.G. Wells. Chapter 9, Sections 6 to 8. I should come to our third talk with a great curiosity to hear of the last portion of the rule, of the things that the samurai are obliged to do. There would be many precise directions regarding his health and rules that would aim at once at health and that constant exercise of will that makes life good. Save in specified exceptional circumstances, the samurai must bathe in cold water, and the men must shave every day. They have the precisest directions in such matters. The body must be in health, the skin and muscles and nerves in perfect tone, or the samurai must go to the doctors of the order and give implicit obedience to the regimen prescribed. They must sleep alone at least 4 nights in 5. They must eat and talk to anyone in their fellowship who cares for their conversation for an hour, at least, at the nearest club house of the samurai, once on 3 chosen days in every week. Moreover, they must read aloud from the book of the samurai, for at least 10 minutes every day. Every month they must buy and read faithfully through at least one book that has been published during the past 5 years, and the only intervention with private choice in that matter is the prescription of a certain minimum of length for the monthly book or books. But the full rule in these minor compulsory matters is so voluminous and detailed, and it abounds with alternatives. Its aim is rather to keep before the samurai, by a number of sample duties as it were, the need of, and some of the chief methods towards health of body and mind, rather than to provide a comprehensive rule, and to ensure the maintenance of a community of feeling and interests among the samurai, through habit, intercourse, and a living contemporary literature. These minor obligations do not earmark more than an hour in the day. Yet they serve to break down isolations of sympathy, all sorts of physical and intellectual sluggishness, and the development of unsocial preoccupations. Of many sorts. Women samurai who are married, my double told me, must bear children, if they are to remain married as well as in the order, before the second period for terminating a childless marriage is exhausted. I failed to ask for the precise figures from my double at the time, but I think it is beyond doubt that it is from samurai mothers of the greater or lesser rule that a very large proportion of the future population of Utopia will be derived. There is one liberty accorded to women samurai which is refused to men, and that is to marry outside the rule, and women married to men not under the rule are also free to become samurai. Here, too, it will manifest there is a scope for novels and the drama of life. In practice, it seems that it is only men of great poetic distinction outside the rule, or great commercial leaders, who have wives under it. The tendency of such unions is either to bring the husband under the rule, or take the wife out of it. There can be no doubt that these marriage limitations tend to make the samurai something of a hereditary class. Their children, as a rule, become samurai, but it is not an exclusive caste. Subject to the most reasonable qualifications, anyone who sees fit can enter it at any time, and so, unlike all other privileged castes the world has seen, it increases relatively to the total population, and may indeed, at last, assimilate almost the whole population of the earth. So much my double told me readily, but now he came to the heart of all his explanations, to the will and motives at the centre that made men and women ready to undergo discipline, to renounce the richness and elaboration of the sensuous life, to master emotions and control impulses, to keep in the key of effort while they have abundance about them, to rouse and satisfy all desires, and his exposition was more difficult. He tried to make his religion clear to me. The leading principle of the utopian religion is the repudiation of the doctrine of original sin. The utopians hold that man, on the whole, is good. That is their cardinal belief. Man has pride and conscience, they hold, that you may refine by training as you refine his eye or ear. He has remorse and sorrow in his being, coming on the heels of all inconsequent enjoyments. How can one think of him as bad? He is religious. Religion is as nature to him as lust and anger. less intense, indeed, but coming with the wide-sweeping inevitableness as peace comes after all tumults and sounds. And in Utopia they understand this, or at least the samurai do, clearly. They accept religion as they accept thirst, as something inseparably in the mysterious rhythms of life. And just as thirst and pride and all desires may be perverted in an age of abundant opportunities, and men may be degraded and wasted by intemperance and drinking, by display or by ambition, may be turned to evil by the dull, the base, and the careless. Slovenly indulgence in religious inclinations, a failure to think hard and discriminate as fairly as possible in religious matters, is just as alien to the men under the rule as it would be to drink deeply because they were thirsty, eat when glutted, evade a bath because the day was chilly, or make love to any bright-eyed girl who chanced to look pretty in the dusk. Utopia, which is to have every type of character that one finds on earth, will have its temples and its priests, just as it will have its actresses and wine, but the samurai will be forbidden the religion of dramatically lit altars, organ music, and incense, as distinctly as they are forbidden to love the painted woman, or the consolations of brandy. And to all the things that are less than religion and that seek to comprehend it, to cosmogonies and philosophies, to creeds and formulae, to catechisms and easy explanations, the attitude of the samurai, the note of the book of the samurai, will be distrust. These things, the samurai will say, are part of the indulgences that should come before a man submits himself to the rule. They are like the early gratifications of young men, experiences to establish renunciation. The samurai will have emerged above these things. The theology of the utopian rulers will be saturated with that same philosophy of uniqueness, the repudiation of anything beyond similarities and practical parallelisms, that saturates all their institutions. They will have analyzed exhaustively those fallacies and assumptions that arise between the one and the many, that have troubled philosophy since philosophy began. Just as they will have escaped their delusive unification of every species under its specific definition that has dominated unearthly reasoning, so they will have escaped the delusive simplification of God that vitiates all terrestrial theology. They will hold God to be complex and of an endless variety of aspects, to be expressed by no universal formula, nor approved in any uniform manner. Just as the language of Utopia will be synthesis, even so will its God be. The aspect of God is different in measure of every man's individuality, and the intimate thing of religion must, therefore, exist in human solitude, between man and God alone. Religion, in its quintessence, is a relation between God and man. It is perversion to make it a relation between man, and a man may no more reach God through a priest than love his wife through a priest. But just as a man in love may refine the interpretation of his feelings, and borrow expression from the poems and music of poetic men, so an individual man may at his discretion read books of devotion, and hear music that is in harmony with his inchoate feelings. Many of the samurai, therefore, will set themselves private regimens that will help their secret religious life, will pray habitually, and read books of devotion, but with these things the rule of the order will have nothing to do. Clearly, the God of the samurai is a transcendental and mystical God. So far as the samurai have a purpose in common in maintaining the state, and the order and progress of the world, so far, by their discipline and denial, by their public work and effort, they worship God together. But the fount of motives lies in the individual life. It lies in silent and deliberate reflections, and at this, the most striking of all rules of the samurai aims. For 7 consecutive days in the year, at least, each man or woman under the rule must go right out of all life of man into some wild and solitary place, must speak to no man or woman, and have no sort of intercourse with mankind. They must go bookless and weaponless, without pen or paper, or money. Provisions must be taken for the period of the journey, a rug or a sleeping sack, for they must sleep under the open sky, but no means of making a fire. They may study maps beforehand to guide them, showing any difficulties and dangers in the journey, but they may not carry such helps. They must not go by beaten ways or wherever there are inhabited houses, but into the bare, quiet places of the globe, the regions set apart for them. This discipline, my double said, was invented to secure a certain stoutness of heart and body in the members of the order, which otherwise might have lain open to too many timorous, merely abstemious men and women. Many things had been suggested, swordplay and tests that verge on torture, climbing in giddy places and the like, before this was chosen. Partly it is to ensure good training and sturdiness of body and mind, but partly also it is to draw their mind for space from the insistent details of life, from the intricate arguments and the fretting effort to work, from personal quarrels and personal affections, and the things of the heated room. Out they must go, clean out the world. Certain great areas are set apart for these yearly pilgrimages, beyond the securities of the state. There are thousands of square miles of sandy desert in Africa and Asia set apart, much of the Arctic and Antarctic circles, vast areas of mountain land and frozen marsh, secluded reserves of forest, and innumerable unfrequented lines upon the sea. Some are dangerous and laborious routes, some merely desolate, and there are even some sea journeys that one may take in the halcyon days as one drifts through a dream. Upon the seas one must go in a little undecked sailing boat, that may be rowed in a calm. All the other journeys one must do afoot, none aiding. There are, about all these desert regions and along most coasts, little offices at which the samurai says good-bye to the world of men, and at which they arrive after their minimum time of silence is overpast. For the intervening days, they must be alone with nature, necessity, and their own thoughts. "It is good?" I said. "It is good," my double answered. "We civilized men go back to the stark mother that so many of us would have forgotten were it not for this rule. And one thinks, only 2 weeks ago I did my journey for the year. I went with my gear by the sea to Tromso, and then inland to a starting place, and took my ice axe and rucksack, and said good-bye to the world. I crossed over 4 glaciers, I climbed 3 high mountain passes, and slept on moss in desolate valleys. I saw no human being for 7 days. Then I came down through the pine woods to the head of a road that runs to the Baltic shore. Altogether it was 13 days before I reported myself again, and had speech with fellow creatures." "And the women do this?" "The women who are truly samurai, yes. Equally with the men, unless the killing of a child intervenes." I asked how it had seemed to him, and what he thought about during the journey. "There is always a sense of effort for me," he said. "When I leave the world at the outside of the journey, I turn back again and again, look at the little office as I go up my mountainside. The first day and night I'm a little disposed to shirk the job. Every year it's the same. A little disposed, for example, to sling my pack from my back, and sit down and go through its contents, and make sure I've got all my equipment." "There's no chance of anyone overtaking you?" "2 men mustn't start from the same office on the same route within 6 hours of each other. If they come within sight of each other, they must shun an encounter and make no sign, unless life is in danger. All that is arranged beforehand." "It would be, of course. Go on telling me of your journey." "I dread the night, I dread discomfort and bad weather. I only begin to brace up after the 2nd day." "Don't you worry about losing your way?" "No. There are cairns and skyline signs. If it wasn't for that, of course we should be wearing with maps the whole time. But I'm only sure of being a man after the 2nd night, and sure of my power to go through. And then one begins to get into it. The first 2 days one is apt to have the events of one's journey, little incidents of travel, and thoughts of one's work and affairs, rising and fading and coming again. But then the perspectives begin. I don't sleep much on the nights of these journeys. I lie awake and stare at the stars. About dawn, perhaps, and in the morning sunshine, I sleep. The nights this last time were very short, never more than twilight, and I saw the glow of the sun always, just over the edge of the world. But I had chosen the days of the new moon, so that I had a glimpse over the stars. Years ago I went from the Nile across the Libyan desert east, and then the stars in the later days of the journey, brought me near weeping. You begin to feel alone on the 3rd day, when you find yourself out on the shining snowfield, and nothing of mankind visible on the whole world save one landmark, one remote thin triangle of iron, perhaps, in the saddle of the ridge against the sky. All this busy world that has done so much and so marvellously is still so little. You see it little as it is, and far off. All day long you go when the nights come, and it might be another planet. Then, in the quiet waking hours, one thinks of oneself, the great external things, of space and eternity, and what means God. He mused. "You think of death?" "Not of my own. But when I go among snow and desolations, and usually I take my pilgrimages in mountains of the north, I think very much of the night of this world. the time when our sun will be red and dull, and air and water will lie frozen together in the common snowfield where now the forests of the tropics are streaming. I think very much of that, and whether it is indeed God's purpose that our kind should end, and the cities we have built, the books we have written, all that we have given substance and a form, should lie dead beneath the snows. You don't believe in that? No. But if it is not so... I went threading my way among gorges and precipices, with my poor brain dreaming of what the alternative should be, with my imagination straining and failing. Yet, in those high airs, and in such solitude, a kind of exaltation comes to a man. I remember that one night I sat up and told the rascal stars very earnestly how they should not escape us in the end. He glanced at me for a moment as though he doubted I should understand. One becomes a personification of up there, he said. One becomes the ambassador of mankind to the outer world. There is time to think over a lot of things. One puts oneself and one's ambitions in a new pair of scales. Then there are hours when one is just exploring the wilderness like a child. Sometimes, perhaps, one gets a glimpse from some precipice edge of the plains far away, and houses and roadways, and remembers that there is still a busy world of men, and at last one turns one's feet down some slope, some gorge that leads back. You came down, perhaps into a pine forest, and hear that queer clatter reindeer make, and then, it may be, you see a herdsman very far away, watching you. You wear your pilgrim's badge and make no sign of seeing you. You know, after these solitudes I feel just the same queer disinclination to go back to the world of men that I feel when I have to leave it. I think of dusty roads and hot valleys, and being looked at by many people. I think of the trouble of working with colleagues and opponents. This last journey I outstayed my time, camping in the pine woods of 6 days. Then my thoughts came round to my proper work again. I got keen to go on with it, and so I came back into the world. You come back physically clean, as though you had had your arteries and veins washed out, and your brain has been cleaned too. I shall stick to the mountains now until I am old, and then I shall sail a boat in Polynesia. That is what so many old men do. Only last year one of the great leaders of the samurai, a white-haired man who followed the rule in spite of his 111 years, was found dead in his boat far away from any land, far to the south, like a child asleep. That's better than to tumble to bed, said I, and some boy of a doctor jabbing you with infections, and distressful people hovering about you. Yes, said my double. In Utopia, we who are samurai die better than that. Is that how your great men die? It came to me suddenly as very strange that, even as we sat and talked across deserted seas, on burning sands, through the still aisles of forests, and in all the high and lonely places of the world, beyond the margin where the ways and houses go, solitary men and women sailed alone, or marched alone, or clambered. Quiet, resolute exiles, they stood alone amidst wildernesses of ice, on the precipitous banks of roaring torrents, in monstrous caverns, or steering a tossing boat in the little circle of the horizon amidst the tumbled, incessant sea, all in their several ways, communing with the emptiness, the enigmatic spaces and silences, the winds and torrents, and soulless forces that lie above the lit and ordered life of man. I saw more clearly now something I had seen dimly already, in the bearing and the faces of this utopian chivalry, a faint, persistent tinge of detachment from the immediate heats and hurries, the little graces and delights, the tensions and stimulations of the daily world. It pleased me strangely to think of this steadfast yearly pilgrimage of solitude, and how near men might come then to the high distances of God. After that I remember we fell talking of the discipline of the rule, of the courts that try breaches of it, and interpret doubtful cases. For, though a man may resign with due notice and be free after a certain time to rejoin again, one deliberate breach may exclude a man forever, of the same of law that is grown up about such trials, and of the triennial council that revises and alters the rule. From that we pass to discussion of the general constitution of this world-state. Practically all political power vests in the samurai. Not only are they administrations, lawyers, practicing doctors, and public officials of almost all kinds, but they are the only voters. Yet, by a curious exception, the supreme legislative assembly must have 1/10, and may have 1/2 of its members outside the order, because, it is alleged, that there is a sort of wisdom that comes of a sin and laxness, which is necessary to the perfect ruling of life. My double quoted me a verse from the canon on this matter, that my unfortunate verbal memory did not retain, but it is in the nature of a prayer to save the world from unfermented men. It would seem that Aristotle's idea of a rotation of rulers, an idea that crops up again in Harrington's Oceania, that first utopia of the sovereign people, a utopia that, through Danton's reading in English, played a disastrous part in the French Revolution, gets a little respect in Utopia. The tendency is to give practically permanent tenure to good men. Every ruler and official, it is true, is put on his trial every 3 years before a jury drawn by lot, according to the range of his activities, either from the samurai of his municipal area, or from the general catalogue of the samurai, but the business of this jury is merely to decide whether to continue him in office, or order a new election. In the majority of cases, the verdict is continuation. Even if it is not the official may still appear as a candidate before the second and separate jury which fills the vacant post. My double mentioned a few scattered details of the electoral methods, but as at the time I believed we were having a number of further conversations, I did not exhaust my curiosities upon the subject. Indeed, I was more than a little preoccupied and inattentive. The religion of the samurai was after my heart, and it had taken hold of me very strongly, but presently I fell questioning him upon the complications that arise in the modern utopia, through the differences between the races of men, and found my attention returning. But the matter of that discussion I shall put apart into a separate chapter. In the end, we came back to the particulars of the great rule of life, that any man desiring of joining the samurai must follow. I remember how, after our third bout of talking, I walked back through the streets of utopian London to rejoin the botanist at our hotel. My double lived in an apartment in a great building. I should judge about where, in our London, the Tate Gallery squats, and as the day was fine, I had no reason for hurry. I went not by the covered mechanical way, but on foot, along the broad tree-set terraces that follow the river on either side. It was afternoon, and the mellow Thames Valley sunlight, warm and gentle, lit a clean and gracious world. There were many people abroad, going to and fro, unhurrying but not aimless, and I watched them so attentively that were you to ask me for the most elementary details of the buildings and terraces that back on either bank, or of the pinnacles and towers and parapets that lace the sky, I could not tell you them. But of the people I could tell you a great deal. No Utopians wear black, and for all the frequency of the samurai uniform along the England ways, the general effect is a gaily colored population. You never see anyone noticeably ragged or dirty. The police, who answer questions and keep order, and are quite distinct from the organization of the pursuit of criminals, see to that, and shabby people are very infrequent. People who want to save money for other purposes, or who do not much bother with their clothing, seem to wear costumes of rough woven cloth, dyed an unobtrusive brown or green, over fine woolen underclothing, and so achieve a decent comfort in its simplest form. Others outside the rule of the samurai range the spectrum for color, and have every variety of texture. The colors attained by the utopian dyers seem to me to be fuller and purer than the common range of stuffs on earth, and the subtle folding of the woolen materials witness that utopian Bradford is no whit behind her earthly sister. White is extraordinarily frequent, white woolen tunics and robes, into which are woven bands of brilliant color, abound. Often these are the cut and purple edge that distinguishes the samurai. In utopian London, the air is as clear and less dusty than it is among the high mountains. The roads are made of unbroken surfaces and of friable earth. All heating is done by electricity, and no coal ever enters the town. There are no horses or dogs, and so there is not a suspicion of smoke, and scarcely a particle of any sort of dirt to render white impossible. The radiated influence of the uniform of the samurai has been keep costume simple, and this, perhaps, emphasizes the general effect of vigorous health of shapely bodies. Every one is well grown and well nourished. Every one seems in good condition. Every one walks well, and has that clearness of eye that comes with cleanness of bud. In London I am apt to consider myself of a passable size and carriage. Here I feel a small and meaning look. The faint suspicions of spinal curvatures, skew feet, unequal legs, and ill-grown bones that haunt one in a London crowd, the plain intimations, in yellow faces, puffy faces, spotted and irregular complexions, in nervous movements and coughs and colds, of bad habits and an incompetent or disregarded medical profession, do not appear here. I notice few old people, but there seems to be a great proportion of men and women at or near the prime of life. I hang upon that. I have seen one or two fat people here. They are all the more noticeable because they are rare. But wrinkled age? Have I yet in Utopia set eyes on a bald head? The Utopians have brought a sounder psychological science than ours to bear upon regimen. People know better what to do and what to avoid, and how to foresee and forestall coming trouble, and how to evade and suppress the subtle poisons that blunt the edge of sensation. They have put off the years of decay. They keep their teeth, they keep their digestions, they ward off gout and rheumatism, neuralgia and influenza, and all those cognate decays that bend and wrinkle men in the middle years of existence. They have extended the level years far into the 70s, and age, when it comes swiftly and easily. The feverish hurry of our earth, and decay that begins before growth has ceased, is replaced by a ripe, prolonged maturity. This modern utopia is an adult world. The flushed romance, the predominant eroticisms, the adventurous uncertainty of a world in which youth prevails, gives place here to a grave deliberation, to a fuller and more powerful emotion, to a broader handling of life. Yet youth is here. Amidst the men whose faces have been made fine by thought and steadfast living, among the serene-eyed women, comes youth, gaily colored, buoyantly healthy, with challenging eyes, with fresh, eager faces. For everyone in Utopia who is sane enough to benefit, study, and training last until 20, then comes the travel year, and many are still students until 24 or 25. Most are still, in a sense, students throughout life, but it is thought that, unless responsible action is begun in some form in the early 20s, will undergo a partial atrophy. But the full swing of adult life is hardly attained until 30 is reached. Men marry before the middle 30s, and the women rather earlier. Few are mothers before 20. The majority of those who become samurai do so between 27 and 35, and between 17 and 30, the Utopians have their dealings with love, and the play and excitement of love is a chief interest in life. Much freedom of act is allowed so that their wills may grow freely. For the past they end mad, and love gives place to some special and more enduring interest. Though, indeed, there is love between older men and fresh girls, and between youths and mature women. It is in these most graceful and beautiful years of life that such freedoms of dress as atmosphere of Utopia permits are to be seen, and the crude bright will and imagination of youth peeps out in ornament and colour. Figures come into my sight and possess me for a moment, and pass, and give place to others. There comes a dusky little Jewess, red-lipped and amber-clad, with deep crimson flower, I know not whether real or sham, in the dull black of her hair. She passes me with an unconscious disdain, and then I am looking at a brightly smiling, blue-eyed girl, tall, ruddy, and freckly warming, clad like a stage Rosalind, and talking gaily to a fair young man, a novice under the rule. A red-haired mother under the lesser rule goes by, green-gowned, with green straps crossing between her breasts, and her two shock-headed children, bare-legged and lightly shod, tug at her hands on either side. Then a grave man, in a long fur-trimmed robe, a merchant maybe, debates some serious matter with a white-tunicked clerk. In the clerk's face, I turn to mark the straight blue-black hair. The man must be Chinese. Then come two short-bearded men, in careless indigo-blue raiment, both of them convulsed with laughter, men outside the rule who practise perhaps some art, and then one of the samurai in cheerful altercation with the blue-robed girl of 8. "But you could have come back yesterday, Dada," she persists. He is deeply sunburnt, and suddenly there passes before my mind the picture of a snowy mountain waste at nightfall, and a solitary small finger under the stars. When I come back to the present thing again, my eye is caught at once by a young negro, carrying books in his hand, a prosperous-looking, self-respecting young negro, in a trimly cut coat of purple, blue, and silver. I am reminded of what my double said to me of a race. End of chapter 9, section 6 to 8. Recording by Vishnu Mambakam, Windsor,